about to listen to the Dr. Daliah Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Daliah Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Daliah.
We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Doc-Dali, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So in Nevada, students went back to school, I think second week of August, early August. New York City students are going back to school today. They say nearly 1 million of them heading back to school today. However, it's going to be a little different than last year because apparently there's a cell phone ban. The cell phone ban was signed into law by Governor Kathy Hochul, approved by the city's panel for education policy this summer. This is going to be a definite change from what we've seen in previous years. And according to the New York Post, they hope that it's going to improve stalled academic performances. I agree. Each of the Big Apple's roughly 1,600 public schools now are tasked with coming up with their own policy as it pertains to cell phones. It might take months to fine tune, but this is not going to be easy. I'm a little confused how we got to this point because, okay, I went to school in the 80s and then I went to college in the 90s, the medical school in the 90s. And so in the 80s, if I pulled out my calculator, I would get hit with a ruler or something thrown at me unless they said, pull out your calculators. If we were allowed to pull out our calculators, we could. If not, those calculators had to be hidden and gone from sight. Same thing with writing notes. I would write notes to boys. I think you're cute. Do you like me? Check the box. Yes or no. A lot of times I got the no check mark. But anyway, you would hide the note in class. So you would think that after the 80s and the 90s, when kids would be going to school, they would also learn to hide the bubble gum, to hide their notes, to hide their phones. But I did a guest lecture at one of the local high schools a few years back, and half the kids were on their phones. And the teachers are like, put your phones away. They weren't scared of the teacher. I was terrified of all my teachers and professors. These kids, they were just on their phones. When did that lackadaisical attitude start? So that means they could have their calculator out when they're doing their math test because they have their phone? Phones away should be a very easy rule to follow. But instead, we had to, the governor of New York has had to make a law. Now, is it that teachers are so bridled now with all the rules on how to discipline a kid that they just are afraid to discipline kids? Now, I'm not saying it should go back to the way, but I was spanked by teachers. Dolly, come up to the front. You're getting your spanking. And I remember one teacher would just smack us in the butt with his cane to keep us in line when we were walking to the cafeteria or walking in line somewhere. And that was in the 80s. Now, I'm not saying that we don't want anybody hitting our kids, but there's got to be a something in between where it's, look, we said no. Now, what also used to scare me is they would call my parents. So if my parents got called, I'd get the belt. It didn't matter what they called them for. If they had to be called and disrupted, I would get the belt. Now, I don't want kids disciplined like that anymore. But do kids fear if their parents are called? If somebody says, I'm going to call your mother, they'll be like, and? I'm going to call your father. Well, if you do speak to him, tell him I haven't seen him in 10 years. What is going on here? Because it used to be, I'm going to call your parents, or you're going to do detention, or nobody fears that. So they're playing on their phones. If a teacher says phones away, the phone should be away. But Governor Kathy Hochul of New York signed the Distraction-Free Schools Bill into law earlier this year, which requires smartphone restrictions in K-12 schools statewide beginning for this school year. It was backed by the teachers union, approved by the New York City Panels of Education Policy. Under the policy, students will still be able to use the devices during their commutes, but they are going to have to fork them over once the bell rings. Now, see, this is what I think. And really quickly, they say exceptions will be made for students who use the devices for medical purposes like monitoring insulin or for those who are directly responsible for the medical care of a loved one. I'm not sure how many 8-year-olds are in that position, but maybe. But see, here's my thing, though. If, God forbid, there is a school shooting or an emergency, I do want the kids having quick access to the phones. So I would, and I've suggested that there be, you before you sit down, it goes into the, you know how they have those, they're made of fabric and they have all these little pockets, and each pocket could be labeled. You throw it into the pocket or the cubby and go sit at your seat. But the idea that the phone is far, far away, we need kids to be able to access their phone so they could call the police if they need to. Why? Because we're living in a different world. School shootings are a lot more common than they were when I grew up. And we do want kids to be able to notify their parents if they need to or call 911. But it could be in the same classroom. Either the cubbies are up front or the cubbies are to the side. All phones in there. And if somebody says, I didn't bring my phone to school today, fine. But if they get caught, they go to the principal's office or the vice principal's office. Now, the city gave $25 million to schools to cover the steps necessary to implement the phone ban. Storing the devices, ensuring a system exists for parents to contact their kids in an emergency. We've been talking about this for years, so hopefully they do have a plan. There's also capping of no more than 20 students per class in the early grades, no more than 23 students in 4th through 8th grade, and no more than 25 students in a high school class by 2028. They also plan on hiring thousands of additional teachers. Apparently, they spend $42,000 a student per school year. So we'll see what happens with that, but I hope it does help their grades and their academic performances. 1-877-Doc-Daliah. Hi, everyone. Dr. Daliah here. As you know, blood banks across the country have declared critically low supplies. In response to this, governors have united for National Blood Donation Week. September 1st through the 7th is National Blood Donation Week, with September 4th National Blood Donation Day. And we are hoping this encourages millions of Americans to donate blood. When crisis strikes, the blood needs to be in the hospitals ready to go. But remember, the units need to be processed days before. And thousands of units of blood are already being used by hospitals on a regular daily basis. So blood supplies need to be prepared and delivered year-round. If you can't donate blood, don't worry. Please host a drive or even spread the word. It all saves lives. You could sign up to donate blood or host a drive at drdaliah.com. Follow the link to National Blood Donation Week. That's drdaliah.com. Remember, 1 pint of blood could save 3 lives. Imagine what the whole country could do.
Let's face it, guys, we're living in times where the truth is becoming more suppressed and censorship is increasing at an alarming rate, especially on social media platforms. It's Clyde, and I want to tell you about a safe and secure digital playground we put together just for you. It's aftermath.media. You get access to thousands of Ground Zero archives and podcasts, along with our private social media groups with your basic membership starting at only $7 a month. Each subscription includes tech support, access to the RSS feeds, along with our own chat room and Telegram channel. In addition, the premium membership includes research study groups, webinars, a document and movie library, a live video stream of Ground Zero, a monthly Zoom chat with me, and other bonus content. Be sure to check out our yearly specials as well. Sign up today while you're thinking about it. Sign up at aftermath.media. Again, that's aftermath.media.
All right, we you're back on the Dr. Daliah Show, 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOC-DALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Daliah, Facebook, The Dr. Daliah Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So the Senate hearing has ended where senators were grilling RFK Jr., and it got heated for part of it. And I'm going to, after I donate blood today, try and watch the whole thing. But of the bits I watched, I think RFK Jr. gave correct answers. One such question he was asked is, do you know how many people died of COVID-19? And he said, we don't know how many people died. And of course, the senator was like, wow, what? How do you not know? How do you know that? And I think we all remember what happened a few years ago. It was absolute chaos. And he even said during the Biden administration, it was chaos and they didn't have the numbers. And not to blame Biden, but if you guys remember, back in late fall 2019, people were getting sick and they were testing negative for flu. They were getting really sick by December. And people were dying and we weren't sure why. Then January hit. Well, end of December, we learned, okay, there's a novel coronavirus. Not necessarily the same as SARS from 2002, but it was a novel coronavirus that was affecting people, which I had thought was possibly leaked from a lab a few months prior, which would have put it back to August of 2019. So now people are coming to the hospital still with flu, still with heart attack, still with stroke, car accidents. But in addition, we also saw severe lung disease. We also saw strokes in people that we didn't really think were going to have a stroke, or heart disease, or myocarditis, or pericarditis, and other things. And some of these individuals were getting really consumed quickly with cytokine storm in their lungs. They were having unique pictures on x-rays and CT scans. And once we realized it was COVID-19, right, because COVID from 2019, we started identifying, well, that could be what this person has. We did not have testing right away. So it was assumptive. And the CDC had said, look, if you don't know exactly the cause of death and you think COVID could have played some sort of a role, put that on the death certificate. Now, when this all started, I had told you guys on air, what we probably should do is the people that were fine, walking around the street, all of a sudden get COVID, start succumbing to it, unfortunately die. That's in one column of the spreadsheet of deaths directly by COVID. Somebody who had a heart attack and died, they died of a heart attack. But if you can't tell if COVID contributed it to or not, say unsure if COVID contributed to it. They also had COVID. That's a second column. Somebody who got, hit by a car accident, George Floyd, on his autopsy, apparently he had evidence of COVID and fluid in his lungs. Column of, look, he died, but coincidentally, we also had a positive COVID test. Nobody did those spreadsheets and nobody did those columns like I had asked. Another issue we spoke about in hour number one is when people in Washington wasn't necessarily ground zero for America, but some of the first cases of COVID were identified in Washington. And individuals were running into the hospital to get tested. And one had like a bill of $2,300. And we didn't have COVID testing at the time. And so people were concerned, saying, well, I don't want to go to the hospital, big bill. And because, the average person doesn't pay their hospital bill or their ER bill that day, hospitals were like, we're going broke. We now that people are starting to flood us, what do we do? So the government said, look, we are going to reimburse you for COVID codes. Well, then you're starting to see everybody get coded with COVID. And so the numbers were now, the lines between the numbers got blurred. I personally think COVID killed a lot of people. I think COVID was deadly. I can't give you the number. And if RFK Jr. today was grilled and under testimony and by penalty of perjury, did come up with a number of 957,492, he'd be in trouble for perjury. You can't just come up with a number because we don't know if those people actually died of COVID. Now, as I said in the last hour, people were finding roadkill and then deciding to move them over and put a sign saying killed by COVID because people were really distrustful of the government and those numbers because of the lockdowns. You had some states say, we have to lock, you can't go to a dentist. Why the hell would they not let people get dental work? Doctors like me were performing dentistry through telemedicine. You can't do that. So people weren't getting dental care. Marijuana dispensaries were open. Imagine that. Marijuana dispensaries could totally be open. But all these other dentists had to be closed. And these states did these ridiculous lockdowns, but they were basing it on we have hundreds of thousands to millions of deaths due to COVID. So back in 2020, people were asking, can we see the numbers, please? Now, I told you, I know people are dying because I see it in the hospital. Students were telling me, doctors were telling me, I was seeing patients that were, short of breath, hypoxic. I was sending them to the hospital. People were dying of it, but how many? So during this RFK Jr. Testimony, they're trying to make him look like a complete fool going, you've been there for 8 months and you don't know how many people died of COVID? No, there's no data sets. And he can't pull them out of his retroperitoneum and lie. We really don't know how many people died of COVID. We know people died, but we don't know how many. Same thing. How many people died from the COVID vaccine? We don't know. We're assuming it's way less than who died from COVID. And I think that assumption is right. But do we know how many people died from the COVID vaccine? How many people got myocarditis? The CDC started to put data, but then that got taken off. In the last year or two of the Biden administration, we didn't see the numbers. And then, how many ITP cases? How many arrhythmias? How many, where's the data? So we don't have good data. So we're trying to make a decision now of the COVID vaccine and giving the COVID vaccine blanketly to everybody, including a healthy 6-month-old and a healthy pregnant lady. And the American public wants to know, look, before I make this decision, do we really have to do that? Polio vaccination, people are pretty convinced, polio was scary. I heard the horror stories, sign me up for the polio vaccine, I'm okay with it. The majority of people okay with that. But now for people to make the decision to continue to get boosters 2 or 3 times a year, they want to know, one, is the vaccine going to give us long-term immunity? Does the vaccine affect our natural immunity? Is our natural immunity already at play? Should we test for antibodies? This is something that we require doctors and public officials to look at. But instead, they keep going, let RFK Jr. let these studies happen. See, RFK Jr. has not said no COVID vaccines ever. He just said, I think we need to reevaluate the data before we make every 6-month-old get it. I don't see that as being inappropriate. I think, in fact, it is his duty. Science is always evolving. What if the COVID vaccine that is now recommended for 6-month-olds is not updated for the newer strains? Don't we need to stop and reevaluate that? And you keep hearing people say, no, you don't relitigate the science. You don't. We always are. You guys relitigated the science when you were talking about masks. Okay, the N95 masks, hazmat suits and all sorts of other sort of wear we use when we're looking at bioweapons and we're looking at things that could kill. But instead, it was, no, you know what? You guys could use those surgical masks that are made in Taiwan and China and that are sitting at the bottom of your car. Just throw them on your face so you have a face covering. Look, I think Americans have a right to know where we are now. And if it turns out that a 6-month-old does need the COVID vaccine, fine, good. Show us the data so then we could we can act on it. But if we're using data from 2020, 2021, and we still don't know where all the data is on side effects, then we need to just take a step back, take a deep breath, and let's look at this. People are accusing RFK Jr. of stopping all vaccines, that he would do what I think Surgeon General Ladapa did in Florida yesterday saying we are not going to mandate childhood vaccines. I don't believe RFK Jr. would do that. He says he is going to still keep the MMR vaccine and other vaccines, a part of the childhood vaccination program. But what I want as a doctor, being pro-vaccine but anti-mandate, is let's do what has always been done in science before politics took over. We look at 2025 landscape. We look at what we have. We look at the risks and benefits, and we look at the data and hopefully come up with better ways to have data that's not politically driven so we can make the right judgment call. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY. Don't go away. Dr. Daliah here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Lisa Wolf here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you. And be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So, sparked a lot of controversy was this arrest of a comedian who posted anti-transgender things on X. And he was arrested. Graham Lineman created popular British sitcoms like Father Ted, The It Crowd, Black Boots. But he gets arrested at Heathrow Airport in London after flying in from Arizona. I think he was working with Rob Schneider and some other comedians on a project. I think he might even be Irish. I don't even think he's British. But there was an issue with his ticket, and he was a little kind of concerned about, what, but he ends up still getting on the flight. And then when he lands in Heathrow, he gets arrested. Metropolitan Police spokesperson had said a man in his 50s was arrested on suspicion of inciting violence. This was in relation to posts on X. Now, it's interesting because I've been hearing a lot of Gen Zs say, don't go to England. You'll get arrested. People get arrested. And ask them, what are you guys talking about? Why are Gen Zs telling everybody not to go to England? They go because people are getting arrested once they land there, depending on what they tweet. And I'm like, no, you can't be serious. This was, like last year. And then you start to see this, and I guess there's been some huge concerns about free speech in the UK. Now, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, has said that people have the right to express themselves freely, but it doesn't sound like he's doing much if people are getting arrested when there's murderers and there's terrorist attacks and other things going on. I think there were 5 officers that had to arrest. They didn't even have to subdue him. That had to arrest this comedian. Apparently, the comedian said he was intercepted by 5 armed officers, taken into a cell for questioning about 3 tweets that he published back in April. Now, what were these tweets? So he has, I guess, a Substack blog. And things he tweeted were, he said, if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, it's, quote, violent, abusive act, unquote. And then I think he suggested, I heard, I don't see the tweet, but something about, you should punch him or whatever, or I don't know. I don't have the tweet. But they say he then appeared to suggest a violent act on that person being in the ladies' room or female-only space. Another tweet appeared to be an aerial shot of a protest group. Now, this is being reported by Newsweek. And when he shows an aerial shot of a protest group, they called it, quote, photo you can smell. And then in a third tweet, he said, I hate them, misogynists and homophobes, F them. Now, apparently he gets arrested. His blood pressure rises to over 200, his systolic blood pressure. Now, that could be stroke range. That could cause a stroke. So then he was taken to the hospital for observation. Now, this suspicion of inciting violence is very subjective. You got a comedian, and I don't agree with his statements, but you have a comedian airing his view on men, biological men and female spaces, and he gets arrested. And so now I guess he's made bail. He's pending further investigation. And I'm not sure when the hearing is going on. But you have all these people now come to his aid saying, "What? There's no free speech in the UK." Now, we make tweets a lot and social media. And what social media has done, it's been earth-shattering, to be, good and bad. One is, for individuals who never thought they had a voice, they have a voice. So while you're sitting there going, I don't like what's happening with our country, I don't like what's happening with our open border, or I don't like what's happening with vaccine mandates, or I don't like what's happening with, immigration or whatever. You have a platform where you have a voice. And that's why these platforms have gotten so popular, because people don't want to be silenced. They want to have a voice. On the other end, we've had some very, very, very bad people and terrorists utilize these social platforms to be able to gain intelligence, to be able to recruit, to be able to radicalize, and to be able to spread hate and hurt others. And our legal system has not caught up with the speed at which this evolved. So somebody could post a picture of you that they took, and it might not be very flattering, and get away with it. Don't I have a choice of something that gets posted on me? But if I post a picture that somebody took of me, I could be sued for copyright violation. It's very confusing right now. Celebrities are getting sued for posting pictures of themselves, because if somebody else took it, they don't have ownership of it. And it's a little bit of a mess. And so you have individuals who may be trying to fight for women's freedom and their privacy and their safety in women's spaces, female-only spaces. Or you might have some people trying to take advantage just to give a name for themselves and get some tweets and get some social media cred. But I think we can all agree that crime is crime. And inciting violence, it's not very, it's not that blurred. You can tell if somebody's inciting violence or not. Like I remember at class, or I was at this lecture, and one of my doctor friends would raise his hand and ask show-off questions. And I'm like, do you really need to ask a question? Because people in the audience, they'll look at another doctor and they're like, well, I want to show them that I know something. You're not teaching me. And I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to see what you think about what I think, and I'm going to get a little bit of mic time. So I told my friend, I go, okay, we're going to another lecture. So help me, if you raise your hand and you ask, a stupid show-off question, I'm going to. He goes, what? You're going to kick me in the cojones? And I go, yeah. Okay, so let's say I tweeted that. I have my buddy ask another question, stupid show-off question. They're going to say that's inciting violence. If I'm going to say, well, somebody just shut these people up, that could be construed as inciting violence, according to the UK. Now, it shouldn't be that ambiguous. It should be pretty obvious, somebody inciting violence or not. But if you're using 5 armed officers to arrest a comedian when there's other criminal issues, somebody has to go, okay, what exactly is going on here? Now, the UK is not America. You're supposed to have free speech in the UK and Europe, but it's not America. But even in America, we lost free speech. We got shadow banned and censored, and these platforms during the Biden years would, until Elon Musk got a hold of Twitter, wouldn't show tweets by people who seemed to tend to be more conservative. Or you would just get outright banned. That doctor questioning why the CDC isn't bringing up natural immunity when we teach medical students about natural immunity all the time as the most powerful immunity, she gets silenced. I think also she got kicked off Twitter, medical license suspended, and she had to take psychiatric classes. So we don't have free speech. It's gotten better since Trump took over and Elon Musk took over Twitter. But, if you are an American and you say something and then you are on British soil, that could be a problem. And I think, people are starting to figure out, look at this going, wait a second here. Am I safe? Nobody wants to get arrested for a tweet. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH, don't go away.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799, and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
As an organ donor, your story doesn't have to end. The good in you can live on. In fact, you could save up to 8 lives and restore sight and health for many more. Sign up right now online as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You'll be happy you did. And just maybe, someone else will be happy too. Go to organdonor.gov. It saves lives. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
All right. We are back on the Dr. Daliah Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So we say goodbye to Giorgio Armani. The iconic Italian fashion designer has died at the age of 91. You know, he was a medical student. I heard that he went to medical school in Milan. He was born in the 1930s, but by the 1950s, so he was studying medicine at the University of Milan, and then he served the military. Then after the military, he got a job as a window dresser at a department store in Milan, worked his way up in the industry, started designing menswear at Nino Cerruti in the 1960s. By 1975, he had his own label with business partner Sergio Galeotti, and whom they were, I guess, according to Parade.com, romantically involved. And then the Armani brand exploded from there. And we don't know his cause of death. He left us at the age of 91. And at this time, we're respecting the privacy of his family and, as they grieve. But if we do get more information, we'll tell you. But, very interesting life. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about, his rise in fashion. But we do know that he was recovering from an undisclosed condition that did keep him out of Milan Fashion Week back in June. Did watch the runway, show, was still, working, at the time, but unfortunately could not make public appearances and then sadly died. The funeral is going to be held privately. 1-877-DOC-DALI, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So this is interesting. Late night comedians may actually be violating the FCC rules when they are politicking for the Democratic Party. The Center for American Rights has now filed a complaint against ABC's Jimmy Kimmel. They filed this complaint with the FCC, accusing the late-night host of unlawful politicking on Jimmy Kimmel Live. This is according to The Wrap. The organization is accusing him of improperly using public airwaves, which are governed by the FCC, to amplify political candidates that he has donated to without disclosing his contributions. It requested that the FCC investigate the show, arguing it was the most prominent example of a systemic issue in late-night television. Now, this is very interesting. Late-night hosts, they say, are notorious for using their airtime to support the left and disparage the right. ABC's Jimmy Kimmel is perhaps the worst offender. Daniel Sewer, president of Center for American Rights, said in a statement, "What's no laughing matter is Kimmel's consistent disregard for the FCC's conflict of interest policies, which prohibit using the airways to advance his personal political agenda." In its complaint, the group points to multiple instances where Kimmel has appeared with Democratic politicians, along with donations he and his staff have made to Democratic candidates and causes. It also cites data collected by right-wing media watchdog, the Media Research Center, which found that Kimmel focused roughly 97% of his political jokes on Republican politicians. According to Sewer, they say Kimmel is making a mockery of the American people by including major Democrat politicians as just another guest on the show. The reality is he has undisclosed skin in the game. He's financially supporting the Democratic Party, hosting massive fundraising events, and bringing these candidates on his show for a free softball interview. Now, neither the FCC, ABC, nor Jimmy Kimmel Live have responded to the Rap's request for comment. But this is interesting. Trump's one of his advisors, Brendan Carr, is investigating the broadcast networks for their perceived bias. ABC, NBC, CBS allegedly is persistently abusing public airwaves. Now, you see, this is something that we have been just, saying, well, I guess we have to live with it. And Trump saying we don't. NPR is getting taxpayer money. Why are we paying, and why are tax dollars going to a radio that is pushing only one political party? But it shouldn't be pushing any political party. It should be apolitical. Why is this happening? How come TV in Hollywood? This is why people have been rejecting it. Why is TV in Hollywood always anti-Trump? Why can't we just enjoy the show in peace? White Lotus is a good show, but they had to, in their latest season, make a big deal, spend 10 minutes ripping on, you voted for Trump? How could, no, she didn't. Really? You voted for, they made such a, she's like, yeah. But they made such a big deal about it where it was obvious their bias. Yeah, I mean, when can we just watch TV where it just doesn't bring up? I'd like to just not hear, about Trump. If you like Trump, you don't appreciate all the criticism about it. If you hate Trump, you don't want to be hearing that also. You want to just watch a show. But they keep bringing him up. And I was wondering how that could happen. In radio, I mean, I know a lot of people do this, but I don't want to because I don't think you're allowed to. But, let's say I want a stock to go up. So I say, hey, guys, I really want you to invest in the stock. I really want you to, but I don't tell you that I invested in it. I think that's a conflict of interest. Also, I'm luckily not a stock show, so I don't tell you to invest. Same thing with medication. I don't tell you to go and buy a medication. I tell you which medications I thought have done well, but, I have stock in Pfizer, in Moderna, in AstraZeneca, in Novo Nordisk. I mean, my stock portfolio or my mutual funds, I think, have all of them in there. But I'm not going to tell you to go and get a drug because I think, one, is, that's between you and your doctor. I do think that some medications work well. We do know that the weight loss with Mounjaro seems to be better than the weight loss with Ozempic, seems to be a little higher. We knew there was some efficacy differences between the Pfizer COVID vaccine and the Moderna COVID vaccine. And there's, and so I'll give you what data I get, but I'm not going to tell you what to do because I don't want anybody thinking I'm getting secondary gain. Now, and taking advantage and you have a responsibility. And we've been watching this BS where all they do is rip on Trump. And you're like, are they allowed to do that? Well, I guess that's just all they do. Being a political satire show is allowed. But are you satiring all politics or are you just, that's what SNL used to do. They would just kind of satire everything. They made fun of Jimmy Carter. They made fun of Gerald Ford. They made fun of, George Bush Sr. That's just kind of what they did. But it just started to turn one-sided. And we understand that Hollywood and entertainers are left, but if there are FCC rules where you can't do this, and you have financial interests in these parties, and you're supposed to show equal. Well, so what a lot of these news stations do is if you offer an interview to one, you have to offer an interview to the other side as well. And they say they've declined. They don't want to come on the show. They're declining an interview. They're declining. So you see a lot of Democrats decline interviews on Fox. You see a lot of Republicans decline interviews on MSNBC. But they have to offer. Now, if they say, no, I don't want to, yes, it looks like they do. But when the FCC investigates, they could see that. If Jimmy Kimmel isn't offering, and when he is having a Republican candidate on, he treats them completely different than he does a Democrat candidate, that's a problem. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. 1-877-DOC-DALIAH. Don't go away.
Can you believe, with all the recent violent protests, looting, and destruction, some areas are considering either defunding or abolishing the police? At a time when America's neighborhoods need the protection of police the most, some elected officials would rather create more chaos by playing politics. If you're sick of elected officials caving in to demands of the radical left, you're not alone. It's time we stand up and declare our support for local police. The majority of police officers are important partners in protecting our God-given rights. If you prefer freedom over chaos, then learn how you can help protect the local police that serve your community. Call today and request your free Support Your Local Police info packet. Dial 800-JBS-USA1. That's 800-JBS-USA1. Request your free Support Your Local Police info packet by calling 800-JBS-USA1 today.